I'm Birna, and today's class is a very rudimentary introduction to Scandinavian medieval glass beads. And I have music in the background as people are playing their phones. Isn't that nice? Okay. Hey, I write like this too, so just get used to it. Yeah. All right. Somewhere at some point, some Bedouin, Mesopotamian, Sumerian person was sitting on the shoreline, probably cooking a fish. And the fire got really hot, and the clay and the sand and the charcoal and everything else got together, and they made a globe of glass. We don't know when, we don't know exactly where. We do have glass beads from Mesopotamia. That's about 3500 BCE. So that's about a 5,000-year-old bead. Okay? The Egyptians had beads. The Sumerians had beads. The Romans definitely had beads. By the time the Romans got a hold of it, they'd been making beads for 3,000 years. And all of their mosaics were made out of what was called tesserae. And I've got an example of tiny little pieces. And what they would do is they would make large sheets of glass, and then they would snap them. They'd make them about a quarter-inch thick, and they would snap it. And where nowadays we usually think of using the top side for ceramics and everything, the Romans turned them on their edge because they never dulled. And so that was tesserae, and they would encase them and set them in ceramic and then make their mosaics. Well, fast forward another 600 or 700 years, and the Scandinavian bead makers are wandering through Rome, and they're wandering through Britain, and they're wandering through Upper Gaul, and they look at all these pieces, and they know enough that they've seen Middle Eastern glass. What they do, they start peeling off with their handy-dandy little bead knife. They start peeling off these old pieces of tesserae, and they start making beads. So that's basically where they were getting all their colors. Because by the time the bead maker of Ribe, and that is the Mercedes of beads, I mean, that was the height of bead making. It was between 700 and 825 when Ribe was the marketplace to be before it ended up being burned to the ground a number of times. The bead maker would come in and he would make his beads, but mostly they were four colors. They were white, they were red, they were yellow, and they were blue. And he would make his glass, same way they're making it today. Heat up fire, get the clay, get that, the sand, get it all together, throw it in. And if you put in 1% cobalt, ground cobalt stone, you got blue glass. If you put in copper, you got red glass. The Romans, believe it or not, had a special formula that they had their gladiators drink that gave them stronger bones. So when they died in the arena and were desiccated and all the bones were taken out and burned down, it had a better white. And that's how you made white, from bone ash.
So they fed them
knowing they were going to die in the arena because
to make better bones out of people, they gave them
a special drink that we don't know what it was, but we have documentation that said it was a special drink mixed up to make stronger and whiter bones.
Have some Pedialyte.
Yeah. So when they and what they probably did is they probably threw the bodies in a lot, cut them up, threw them in a large vat, like they do now at the ME's office. They took off all the meat, tossed it to the dogs or the lions or whatever, took the bones, burned them down, crushed them. That made white. Now, to take the white bead and you added lead, that made yellow. And those were your four basic beads. And that's what you've got. Now, moving forward, you've got a number of other metals that you could make greens, you could make purples, but the Ribe, or Ribe, depending on how you want to pronounce it, bead makers stuck basically with those 4 heads. All right. So he or them, we're pretty sure it wasn't a she because it was very, death to the patriarchy. But anyway, we're pretty sure they were male bead makers. And since it was 125 years, there was probably more than one, and it was passed down. But they would show up first thing in the season as the ice got off a bit, and they would find their little spot, and they would make a furnace about this high, called a volcano furnace. No bellows, no air, just a little volcano with clay and straw, and it cooked itself as they fired it up. And they had a spout here and a tiny little spout there. They would put in their wood, air would come up, and they would get up to 1,300 degrees Celsius. And they would take these little pieces of tesserae, and they would put them on a stick that was pointed like this, and then from there they would dip it, and then they would melt it and wrap the bead. And we do the same damn thing today. And these are wrap beads. Now they also drew beads, which meant they made a big tube of glass about this big with a hole in it, just a hole in the middle, sort of like a Twizzler, but without the spin. Okay, and then they would pull it, and they would pull it hundreds of yards, still hot, and you could get seed beads this small with a hole in the middle. Wow. Yeah, and again, same thing today. They're turning out seed beads by the millions in India. They do it basically the same way, except they've got an extruder. Comes out with a hole in the middle, just like they do anything else, like pasta or whatever. And as it comes out, it draws, cools, snaps. Yeah, if you really want to see some fun things, Google or YouTube, really, seed bead manufacturing, glass beads, and it's amazing. It comes off on huge pieces, and it's heated all the way down, and like drawn wire, where you make it smaller and smaller and smaller, they just pull it until it gets the size they want. And just cut little pieces.
So kind of like molasses candy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or again, Twizzlers, because that's how they make Twizzlers, or anything like that. So the Ribe bead maker had a specific shape that they did. They were known for a number of shapes. I've got some of the more rudimentary ones. By chapter 4, which I haven't started yet, I will get into the multicolored ones. They even have one that the archaeologist calls the Mexico bead, because they discovered it the day that Denmark beat Mexico in the World Cup. And so they call it the Mexico bead. 64 individual pieces of glass drawn to that big. And I've got photos here in the book. You can take a look at them after you do your touchy-feely and everything. Also, what I'm doing is I'm recreating most of the grave digs of glass beads from Iceland, because this is specifically Icelandic beads. I've been working with the National Museum of Iceland. They've been sending me data on photos that I took the first couple times I was in Iceland at the National Museum. So I'm recreating all the glass beads of all the digs in Iceland. I've got 5 more to do. And that'll be in chapter 1. But I've got 2 here. This was the Kellerstapper, the dead woman in a hole that I taught last year. And this was from yeah, you like that, don't you? Yeah, it gets everybody's attention. I have another dead woman in a hole in 2024. And this is from the Settlement Museum. They were digging a new hotel in Reykjavik, and they discovered one of the very first longhouses in Iceland. And in it were 10 beads. I've got 2 more to finish. And when we were in Iceland, when Laura and I were in Iceland the very first time, we went to the settlement and I shot photos of that. So that's it. Some of the beads are, you start with mother bead, which just looks like this. It's just a big bead. Absolutely nothing special. Just a big hunk of burning glass. Okay? Thank you very much. And then from there, you would take your knife and score it and make a melon bead. Okay? You could also score it and make a ridged bead if the scoring went this way. Or you can make a segmented bead if the scoring went this way. As the bead maker got better, they did some spot eye beads, and you'll be able to see them when you get closer. They're cobalt beads with white irises and then red spots. And then the very last one they made, and the archaeologists think that this may have been Ribe 2.0. And I kid you not, that's the way they're referring to it. Because Ribe fell out of favor, and then it came back for a few years, and they made what was called a wasp bead, which the yellow and the blue. Now, by 790 to 825, I know this is going to sound really, really strange. All of the cheap knockoff beads were coming from the Middle East. And most of the beads that you find in Iceland, with the exception of a couple of very old Bible beads, are the knockoff, cheap, foreign beads that were being made down in the Middle East. And at that point, you lost a lot of your creativity and your expertise, and the Ribes bead makers couldn't compete, so they went out of business. Like I said, So you think outsourcing today is a new thing? No, they were outsourcing beads in the 800s.
So it was basically bead makers or crafters versus bead manufacturers.
Yes, and the last terrazzo manufacturer right now is in Milan, and they have 2,700 different colors of glass. And believe it or not, believe it because it's true. 6 miles from my house is a stained glass guy who goes to Italy and sells glass to Italy from Callahan. I know it. He's been doing this 40 years. His wife's family has been doing it 125 years. He's 85 years old, and I'm buying as much scrap glass and sucking knowledge as much as I can because I know that he's going to die. I know that sounds really bad, but he's 85 years old. He fights it. Yeah, it could happen.
Death of Texas.
So anyway, but he has probably 50 Tupper totes of scrap glass in his front yard. And when Marla and I went over the first time, he goes, yeah, I got some of this, I got some of this, I got some of this. He sells it by the pound. And I went last time and bought 6 pounds. I bought 3 pounds the time before. And those 6 pounds will make 5,000 beads.
How much does he charge currently for it?
$3.50 a pound.
Okay.
Yeah. And he sold
$3.50 a pound.
Yeah. And for $28, he sold me the greatest tool I've ever owned, and I own a lot of tools. It is anybody do leather here?
No.
You know what? Do you know?
No.
I do that out. All right. You know what carving? Okay.
Yeah.
There's one for glass,
Yes.
and I didn't know. Yeah. Instead I can cut it like this, and I can knock off beads. We're doing 40 a day now. Wow. And then your eyes start to cross. But yeah, it's amazing how fast you can do beads and how little glass it takes to do. Like each one of these, when you come up and you look at these, okay, each one of these squares is a bead. And Ibn Fahad mentions in his travels in the Rus, travels among the Rus, that the bead makers would get 1 dirham per bead.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like
Good money.
And I don't know what a dirham was worth at that point. I know it's like 30 cents now, but when the rich people hit 10,000 dirhams, their wives got a solid silver. And for every 10,000 dirhams they were worth in Cuban roofs, they would get one. And when they hit 100,000, they melt that down and sell it. She got a gold one. So 1 dirham for 1 bead.
You figure out how to kidnap pretty easily.
Don't fall in late. So the last thing I want to talk about before we do this is coefficients of expansion. And now we get into the math that he's excited about. All right. Thermal expansion, and there's 3 types, length, width, volume, states that a given item will expand or contract at a given rate at a given heat. And that is the coefficiency of that item. So if you melt down your sneakers, that rubber will expand to a certain point mathematically and then contract back. Same with your iced tea. It will become gas, it will expand. When it cools, it will go back to water. Okay? Glass is no different. Modern glass really makes a difference in COE. Okay, I'm going to use these. These are standard glass cane that you buy. These are a COE at 104. The higher the number, the lower the temperature it takes to melt. These will melt at about 1200 Celsius. Okay, it's a pretty easy thing to do. I use a 4-tube oxypropane torch that will get up to bottle glass and stained glass, like some of these others, is somewhere between 82 and 96. And it melts at about 1400 Celsius. However, we've got Pyrex, we've got Corning, we've got what's called borosilica. Borosilica melts at 1700 degrees Celsius. So now, if you take a piece of 104 and a piece of 32, which is what borosilica is, you heat them both together and you wrap one over the other, chaos ensues. And I've got examples here. What happens is if the borosilica is on the inside and the clear is 104, the borosilica doesn't constrict at the same time as the 104, and the 104 cracks because it's shrinking and it can't shrink fast enough because the borosilica is not playing well. If you put the borosilica clear on the outside and the 104 on the inside, the 104 shrinks, the borosilica doesn't, it sucks it in, and as it sucks it in, it also cracks. So glass does not play well together.
So basically, the lower the coefficient, the higher melting point it has?
Yes, yeah. Now, did it matter to the bead makers? No, because they made their own glass. And their glass was probably the same formula as the glass that they stole, repurposed from the mosaic in British Roman cathedrals or the baths or whatever they dug up. Now, you also had Roman ampules, tiny little bottles that would float up, bottle glass that would break in shipwrecks and come up, and the salt. And what a friend of mine was telling me that when St. Helena, Mount St. Helena went off, it threw enough heat that a lot of the lava caused the basalt, and the glass makers were up there taking truckloads of basalt to take back the melt and use it in their crafts. So you've got one smart guy in a small furnace with a stick and a knife making a living and trading beads for hundreds of years. Yeah.
Old guy.
Hey, it's great job for you to get it. So that's basically it for this class. Now, end of January, I'll give the whole thing. And we will have one whole big class, and it'll be everything. And I'll probably have 6 tapes, because I'll have all the chapters done. But at the moment, come up, touch. A lot of this is well, this is all the stuff I've made. Most of it is some of it is borosilica. If it's not borosilica, it's one of the others. And I can pretty much tell you which one is which.
When did they start making the Italian Millefiori with the various glass tubes? Is that much later?
Much later, yeah. It was after they moved to the island of Milano, because Venice threw them out for fear that they were going to burn the whole city down. Which is a good, I mean, you got all these fires, and you had like hundreds of glass makers in Milan, not Venice, Milan. And so they moved them, they physically moved them out to this island, and that's where they were.
Oh, I looked up a value of a Durham in the 800s.
Yeah.
In today's money, it would be $217.81 per.
Send me that link because I need the reference for it.
You got it.
Thank you. All right, so I got a car here. Anybody want to trade their car for this? I mean, really, at $200, let's just say $200 a bead. There's 400 beads here.
There was one of the burials in a National Geographic somewhere in Scandinavia that it was just your standard. You were talking about the little run-of-the-mill Middle Eastern beads, but there was one bead that it was a beautiful faience blue, and when they dated it, it was from the time of Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
So how did that bead get from Egypt in 1500 BC to Scandinavia in 800 AD?
Well, I can tell you exactly how it came up at the number. The Scandinavian traders went Rus, the Volga, the Dnieper, or across into the Mediterranean. They traded, became Varangian guards,
Yes.
stayed, carved things on lions, and came home. I mean, that's Harold Fairhair. That's where he got all his money to go back and wage war and become king. He was the chief one of the Varangian guards.
In the Hagia Sophia, up in the balconies and the balusters, they would carve
Oh yeah,
Their names.
yeah.
their names and stuff up there. So
Yeah.
Hey, today we're in the Hagia Sophia.
Canute was here. But no, they've been trading, and a glass bead, unless it's really abused or tossed, or it becomes a sand glass bead, it's going to look exactly like it did. Isotopic analysis doesn't have to destroy the bead. They can just look at it. So they can tell you the age. So I'm not surprised, but yeah, they've been making beads the same way for a long time, and they made better beads then than we're making now, let me tell you. With a stick and a knife.
They were craftsmen back then. Even Roman concrete is better than.
Oh yeah, yeah. These are some of the Ribe beads. The guy who wrote this book, and I recommend it if you do class.
Okay, Ribe, define.
Ribe, it is a marketplace in Scandinavia. It was on a lake, away from prying eyes, that around 600 became a major marketplace, and by 700 it was a permanent settlement. And then the Phrygians came, and they had a few teates, and they burned it down. And then it moved on to Birna and Kalpang and Lofton. But that was one of the major ones, and this guy was the primo. And these are the pieces. I'm not allowed to. Yeah, some of these.
Ooh, pretty.
Yeah. And now that little piece, that little mosaic is smaller than anything that, it's the size of the whole of one of my beads.
I like the ones on the front with the little white ziggies.
Yeah, there it is. There's a mosaic bead. That's 64 black and yellow checkerboard bead. Yeah. We're at $285.
Yes.
Okay, so if, you wanna kill those, and y'all come on up and we'll talk
Adult or monkey?
bees. Yeah.